Hello, everybody. Welcome to another exciting, thrilling, on the edge of your seat episode of Views on View. I am Steve Edwards, the host with the face for radio and the voice for being a mime, but I'm still your host. With me today, I have one of our special returning guest hosts, an initial OG of Views on View, as we say, Mr. Erik Hanchett. How you doing, Erik?
Hey, how's it going, Steve? Good to be
Good.
back.
Good to have you. Good to have you. So Erik comes to us from the wilds of Reno, I believe, still, right?
Yep, live in Reno, Nevada, northern Nevada. So,
Yeah. How's things down there? Where it's still cold and snowing up here in early April in Oregon.
yeah, similar here in northern Nevada. Some people think that Nevada is just Las Vegas and that we always get 100-degree plus temperature, but
Right.
here in northern Nevada, it's actually closer to Lake Tahoe, and we have some ski areas. So we live in a little bit of a valley, but we get quite a bit of snow, and we just got snow like last week. So it's still, at this point, we're still getting crazy weather. But that's good because I don't personally ski or snowboard, but my family does. I'm trying to get back into it. I did it when I was a kid, and it's great going skiing in the ski resorts around here. So that's
Same
really fun.
here. I got into skiing a couple of years ago through a buddy of mine. I hadn't skied in like 25 years. And so I'm loving this because Mount Hood, I live about, it probably takes me 45 minutes to get up to Timberline on Mount Hood where I got to pass. And I mean, we're just getting dumped on every day. Every day I go up, there's a whole bunch of new snow. And we're sort of up to, I think where our normal average is. But yeah, it's just a ton of new snow, which means spring skiing is going to be awesome, which usually goes through like end of May around here. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting up there and skiing again, hopefully next week.
Wow, nice. Is it late in the season now for you?
No, I mean the season usually goes up through end of May. Usually get some pretty decent spring skiing, but
Nice.
yeah, we've been getting. I think last week I got like 3 or 4 feet over the weekend, and we've gotten some more over the week, and haven't
I
had a
will
lot of
say,
sunny days, unfortunately. But still, it's good snow, which means we'll have a lot for spring skiing,
I
which will
will
be
say
really
I
really
am
nice.
getting a little sick of all the snow though, and
Yeah,
the weather craziness. I'm ready for spring and I'm ready for summer
sun,
hot
warmth.
weather. Yeah,
Yes, yeah. My parents live in Tucson, and so I've been making a point to go down there and hang out and work from their place for a week. Trying to do that. I did it in January and it was still sort of cold. So once it warms up again, I'm going to head down there again and just hang out and warm up for a while.
for sure.
So today we are going to talk about UnoCSS. And for those of you who remember the card game from your childhood, no, I don't believe it has anything to do with UnoCSS, although Anthony Fu could probably answer that question for us better. But it's basically I don't know if it sees itself as an improvement on Tailwind, sort of the atomic CSS type library or not. But I know nothing. Erik knows everything, so I'll let Erik talk about UnoCSS.
Yeah, this is kind of a surprise to me. It's been out for a while. I have been doing, for those who have been listening to Views on View or may know me from the View community, I've been doing YouTube videos for quite a while and blog posts, and people have been asking me to check out Uno CSS for quite a while. I think it's been out for a year or two. I could be wrong. I'll have to look at the first. It's all open source. I'll have to look at the first release. But so being a curious person and trying to create fun content for my YouTube channel, I decided to give it a shot, and I was pleasantly surprised. I've used a lot of different frameworks, UI component frameworks out there. Give a quick plug. I'm a developer advocate for AWS Amplify, and we have our own component framework called Amplify UI. But that one's more of like a full on component framework where we have our own primitives, buttons, and menus and dropdowns and modals and things like that. But Uno CSS is more in like the line of Tailwind CSS, where if you look at the H1 on the UnoCSS.dev website, if anyone wants to follow along, it says it's instant on-demand atomic CSS engine. It's customizable, powerful, fast, and joyful. So it's a joyful experience. At least that's what it says in the H1. A very well done website too, by the way. I really like it. It's the brainchild behind it is Anthony Fu. If you're in the Vue community, you probably have heard his name quite a few times. He's the guy behind a bunch of really popular projects like VUEs. If you ever use composables, you probably brought that into your app. VTest, he helped write some of that. He's also on the Windy CSS core team, I believe. He's created VTest, not VTest, but VTest, which is like a opinionated Vite plus Vue starter template. Oh, did I miss anything that he's done?
I don't have it memorized, so
He has a
so
lot of
not
different
sure.
projects. I think he's somehow affiliated with Nux too. I think he works well with the Nux people, but he has a lot of really interesting open source projects, especially a lot in the Vue community. So, where should we start, Steve?
I guess you could talk I guess its ancestry. I've been reading about it on the page here, and I guess the purpose of it, and what it supposedly does better than maybe Tailwind or Windy, which is apparently no longer supported. Oh, and to answer your question, October of 2021 was its first commit or its first
Ah,
release on GitHub.
yeah. So it seems like a may have been inspired by all the lockdowns and COVID lockdowns. Everybody came up with a side project during that time. Maybe Anthony
Right.
Fu the same, or at least a year after.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So it's inspired by Windy CSS, Tailwind CSS, and Twind, but kind of the differences in it, they say it's a lot more customizable. They call it fully customizable, where you can take pretty much any of the tail. Well, let's take a step back before we talk about customization, just to define some terms for those who may not know. I think most people do, but Tailwind CSS is like a utility first class framework. And the way you usually create your apps using Tailwind, and this is a simplified version for those Tailwind experts out there, but you usually have classes and then you have these like short little class names like uh, MT-4, which stands like margin top, add 4 pixels. And then you might have something called text-color-500, and that'll add a CSS property for the color for a font. So you can pretty much create your whole application just adding these little utility classes everywhere, and they all translate to CSS. And then when it builds and compiles your app, only the CSS and those utility classes that you're using will be inside your application. So it's really, I used it a lot. I've used it a lot just to quickly create and scaffold and CSS. Since I can put it all in my HTML applications, it's less verbose than doing inline styles, of course, and it's pretty powerful. And I'd say it's gained a lot of popularity in the last few years, and to the point where other frameworks are kind of also taking on, or engines, I guess you could call them, are also taking on this same kind of utility class style. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the the thing to know is that you're not. I mean, by itself, Tailwind doesn't really have any components. Like a Beautify or a Bootstrap View or something like that. It's the CSS classes by themselves. Now, if you look around do some searching and look at the ecosystem, there's a lot that has sprung up around Tailwind. I mean, pre-built components using Tailwind. They have their own icons library, hero icons, and you got Tailwind UI, which gives you a number of UI components that are all made with Tailwind. It's got like some modals and buttons and select lists and transitions and things like that. Um, and there's Tailwind UI, which you can buy, which I did, and I love it, which has a whole bunch of pre-made components, pages and shells and little smaller components that you can just copy paste in. So by itself, Tailwind is just the atomic library tool set, but there's a big ecosystem around it where you can literally go find what's the term I'm looking for? A template. There we go. Drop it in and then tweak it to your content. But very different from Like I said, the bigger frameworks, Bootstrap, VUE, Vuetify are probably some of the better known ones in the Vue community.
Or Quasar, yeah.
Quasar, right? Yeah, Luke's hosted on. Used to host with me from down under, and he's real big in the Quasar community. Does quasarcasts.com.
Oh, that's really neat. Yes, that's a good summary of Tailwind. I've used a little bit of Tailwind UI. I know like there's even something called Headless UI, which I think is made by Adam Atwathan and that same crew
Mm-hmm.
that you can combine with that it's used in Tailwind UI to make more interactive type components instead of
Yeah.
just
Mm-hmm.
normal um, instead of just having these classes and just the look and feel, you actually can have some interaction and JavaScript behind it.
Yep.
I think some people have compared Headless UI to Radix on the React side in some ways.
Well,
So,
Headless UI support has both Vue and React versions
oh yeah, that's
of
true.
the code that you can copy. Same with, I think, Tailwind. Um, Not Tailwind UI, Headless UI has the Vue and React components as well.
So going back to the UnoCSS, so as you already alluded to, Steve, so I believe Anthony Fu was on the Windy CSS core team,
He
and they
was.
have Windy CSS, as you said, is no longer actively maintained any longer. And Windy CSS was sort of a better Tailwind CSS. It was a fully compatible with Tailwind CSS v2, and they added some like additional features that they're calling it boosting your workflow, and further opens up more possibilities. So we have like these more variant groups. So if you ever seen like dark or light, that's like a kind of variant class that you can add in. You put dark colon and then like hover or dark colon something else, and then you can have it like when certain if you have light or dark mode set up on your computer, it can, or if you have a switch on your website, you can make it look differently. There's also like better responsive design. So Windy CSS, which I haven't used, but from what I can tell, was taking Tailwind CSS v2 and then adding a bunch of additional features. Then UnoCSS, like you said, came out in 2021, and they kind of started off with like, let's take the features from Windows CSS and then let's improve on it even more and adding more features and using something called presets, which presets are like plugins that you can add into your app. And so UnoCSS inherited Windy CSS on demand, natural, some utilities like Attributify, which I can talk about. There's shortcuts, variant groups, compilation modes, and then UnoCSS brought some new things to the world, to this engine, including pure CSS icons, a different type of Attributify, a valueless Attributify, which we'll talk about, and Tagify and web fonts, etc. And so it's kind of, and there's a whole section on why you may want to use UnoCSS, but it's really taking like some of the best parts of Tailwind CSS and on top of that, Windy CSS, and then creating like just a lot of different features to make it really easy to create CSS and atomic CSS inside your application.
So the gist is still the same in that you got your predefined classes and you add them to your markup.
Yes.
Okay. Now, does it still do the color ranges like 100 to 900 like Tailwind does, or does it, and allows you to customize and create your own colors if you want?
Yep. Yep. So you have the same exact color schemes that Tailwind has. I've been told that there's some slight differences, but like the basics are the same between Tailwind classes and UnoCSS classes. In fact, Tailwind has not just Tailwind classes, it also has Bootstrap, Tachyon, and Windy CSS custom classes. Because you can do things like in Windy CSS, like I said before, you can do MT-4, and that would translate to like margin top 4 pixels.
Right.
But you can do actually MT-10 pixels or MT-20 REM, and that would do a margin top with 20 REM instead. So it's almost like you can not just do Tailwind, but you can use these other libraries that have these atomic CSS utility classes. I have someone in the comments of my video said that some of the Bootstrap utility classes, which I've never used. I have used Bootstrap, but I don't remember using them in utility classes. It's been such a long time that they actually overlap with the Tailwind ones, and the Tailwind ones wins out though. So if you are using if you're used to like the Bootstrap utility classes, there might be a few that are the same as the Tailwind, but the Tailwind ones will win out on it.
Okay. Yeah, I can see the similarities. I use Bootstrap VUE every day, so there's a lot of classes that are very similar. That the way Tailwind works.
Are you a Bootstrap fan, Steve?
I don't know if I'm a fan. I use it because I have to, day to day. But I mean, I've used it before. I can remember when it was pretty much the only thing, before we started getting things like Bulma and other libraries. But yeah, I have no problems with it. Bootstrap Vue has been very nice from a component library standpoint, in that a lot of things you can drop in and just write your code and configure them pretty easily. Data tables or form fields and stuff like that. So
Yeah, it's good to remember. A lot of people think that we're only using, everybody's using Beautify or Quasar, but there's quite a few people in the Vue community still using Bootstrap Vue, or just using their own style sheets or CSS modules, and like not no one size fits all for the whole community.
yeah, the project that I'm working on, my Inertia Laravel Vue project, I wanted to use Beautify. I really did, and we had John Leader on a few months ago, I think, talking about Beautify version 3 and so on. But the one thing that held me back from using it was the lack of data tables, because that's something I use, quite heavily in this particular app that I'm doing. And so because of that, I sort of stayed away from Beautify, and it wasn't quite ready yet. There were some other issues as well. So I've been, I went with a Laravel Breeze starter kit, which uses Tailwind and Vue and Laravel out of the box. So I've just been sticking with Tailwind on this current project.
Yeah, works great. One thing UnoCSS doesn't support is the Tailwind plugin system that they have.
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely, if you are a hardcore Tailwind user and you use Tailwind's plugin system or specific configurations, it might be the migration might be harder going to UnoCSS. So there's definitely some trade-offs that you have to kind of think of. And it's but UnoCSS, it also says it's high performant and extensible. So I guess we could talk about some of these extensions or plugins that you can add in. I think we all can understand at this point how Atomic CSS works and just adding classes in. By the way, when I was using this, I used it on a Vue app, but you can use this on React, Angular. It even has installation instructions on how to use it with like Solid and Quick, and it looks like you can pretty much use it everywhere, which is really nice. So this is definitely not like a Vue only project by any means.
Yeah, Tailwind's the same way. You drop it in and use it.
Yeah, which makes sense because this is CSS we're talking about here. Yeah,
Right.
they have installation guides on Next, Astro, Webpack, Runtime, CLI, PostCSS. I think it even has a CLI that you can use to install it. Yeah, there's a UnoCSS CLI. So if you really want to start your app with UnoCSS, you can use the CLI.
Now, one thing that's interesting, that here's one difference from Tailwind, and I just remember when I first started using Tailwind, I couldn't figure this out, but Uno doesn't do any browser style resets. So Tailwind by default will go in and reset all your styles. So if, like all your H tags and I can't remember all the other ones I've dealt with, but basically you can go add an H1 if you're using Tailwind. If you go add an H1 into your code, all the pre-built browser styles that go with an H1 in terms of the font size and the font weight and all that kind of stuff are gone. So you specifically have to add it back with your classes. So you have an H1 from a semantic point of view in terms of your document structure and how that could come into play with whether it's SEO or international, not international. What's the term for accessibility?
Accessibility, yeah.
There we go. You have it from a semantic viewpoint, from a visual viewpoint. You specifically have to add, do I want a font weight bold? What font size do I want? Do I want a line height? Whatever the case may be. Whereas UnoCSS says that they specifically do not do any style resetting for maximum flexibility.
That's a good point. I wonder if there's like a preset that changes some of that.
Well, they says you can, if you want to do that, and if you're using the Uno by itself, you can use something like normalized CSS.
Okay. That's sort of like when you start a new project, and I haven't done this in a while because I think some of my frameworks I've used do this for me. But yeah, the first thing you do is like you add in normalize or you reset your CSS somehow, depending on that was like a thing I used to always do all the time, because then it would look correctly in every single browser, or at least hopefully.
So one thing I guess it just struck me that I'm a little confused on. You said if you use this with other tools, you wouldn't just use Uno by itself? I mean, you wouldn't use it as the Uno, thing on your application?
Yeah, no, I would.
Oh, dang, I missed my rim shot. I should have had that ready. Anyway.
Yeah, you would definitely. I think what I would say is that once you're picking like a CSS framework or UI component framework, that you mixing and matching is usually almost always a bad idea. It's if you never really want to like add in material design framework and then another framework on top of that, or using Tailwind, or I'll use Uno and then bring something else in. So no, probably wouldn't be the best idea to do that.
Okay, just make sure I didn't misunderstand there, because to me, yeah, you said something about Bootstrap classes conflicting with Tailwind classes, so that's why I was wondering. But yeah, all by itself would make more sense. I don't want to deal with conflicts, to be honest. I got enough of that in my life.
Yep, for sure.
So now that we know about Uno, have you been using it at all? Have you tried it in any projects or anything?
I tried it in my video that's on my YouTube page, plug eric.video, if you want to check it out. But it's kind of a lot of interest. So when I used it, I was just kind of playing around with it in that context, trying it out different features. So I went through most of the a bunch of the presets. So let me go over a few of them. So the Uno preset, there's a Uno preset which is default, and that includes the Uno preset Windy, or Uno preset Wind, and Uno CSS, or Uno CSS preset Wind, and Uno CSS preset Mini. And that's kind of like the one that you want to use if you're just checking this out. This will have all those different Tailwind, Tachyon, Windy CSS utility classes in there that you'll want to use. It also kind of bundles in this mini preset, which gives you additional features for different variants like dark mode, and an at layer. CSS native at layer is supported. So you can do layered at layer, VUE, and then your CSS classes, and it also has a theme available. So you can use a fully customizable theme property in your config, which allows you to create they're almost like design tokens in some ways. It kind of reminds me of it if you've used design tokens, where you can put in different brands and components, and well, mostly colors in this case. And then you can also use some customized rules, and that's all part of preset mini, which is a part of the default preset Uno preset. And then I used a couple other ones, Attributify, which that enables attributes in your presets. And the way that kind of works is you might have a preset that has something like BG-blue-400, which is like background blue with the hue of 400. And you might have hover colon BG-blue-500. And then you might have dark colon blue-500. And what you can do with this attributes is you can use HTML attributes inside your HTML elements. So you can add an attribute called BG and have BG equals, and then then have a list of all the kind of related attributes to BG, which is the background. So you can put blue-400 or hover :blue-500 or dark :blue-500. You can also do things, I was playing around with it, you can just put flex. So if it only has one attribute, like you normally inside a class, like if you're using Tailwind, you would put in flex, and then you would put in justify content. I think it's like justify center or line item center. And you can actually use those as attributes on the HTML element. So like in a button attribute, you could just put flex, and that'll add display flex as a CSS property. And you can do the same thing with color, text color red. So you can add these attributes in instead of having them in as classes. So it's kind of interesting. I liked it because we have something similar in Amplify UI. We call them style props. So it was kind of a nice way to do it. I don't know. The one thing I did notice is after I added these in, and I got a lot of feedback on my YouTube video about that, and a lot of people are like, "Why would you want to add classes as attributes?" And I was like, "Well, I think it's just handy to add in rather than putting in a class, and it's nice to group similar classes together inside as an attribute." But some people are really against it.
So basically, if I'm understanding presets, they're basically a sort of a template. I don't know if
Yeah,
you
they're
call it
like
a template.
plugins
So
or
here's a
template
predetermined
plugins.
list of different capabilities or different classes and things, sort of as a toolbox, for lack of a better
Yeah,
term.
yeah. So when you set up, like in Vite, when you set it up, you add in UnoCSS as a plugin to Vite, and
Mm-hmm.
then inside UnoCSS you can add in each preset. And then the default preset is that preset Uno I just talked about, but then you can add in presets like for Attributify.
So they don't. So your presets they're different things. They're not like the same thing, just different styles and sizes and shapes or whatever.
Yeah, you can think of them like different plugins, like this adds at this the Attributify one adds in allows you to have classes as attributes on your elements. Another one, maybe this will clarify it a little bit. Like another one is Tagify. So it's called preset-Tagify.
Mm-hmm.
And this does something where instead of having, you have your spans, your divs, your mains, and all your other HTML5 tags, now you can actually have a tag be a name of one of these classes. So let's go back to Flex. So you can actually have a tag that's Flex inside your app. So you just put Flex. That would like create basically a Flex tag, and it adds in a CSS class for basically a CSS Flex inside there. So you can do that for Flex. You can do that for text color. So that's kind of another way where you can start tagifying your classes.
So what's the benefit of Tagify? I'm looking at it, and it's if I'm understanding the docs correctly, it's basically when you only have one attribute that you want to add to one class that you want to add to a specific element. So instead of div class equals flex, it's just a flex tag. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah,
Hmm.
I think it just saves you like a little bit more time. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of having to type out, of course, we all use Emmet and VS Code, so maybe this is not that big of a deal. But instead of writing div class equals flex, flexbox end tag, close div, you can be like flex tag, information there, close flex, or text dash red. I thought this wasn't quite as useful as Attributify, but I think that's neat that you can add it in there.
Mm-hmm.
Another one I found, one I found like worked well with the tag one, this Tagify preset is called icons. It's
Mm-hmm.
called the icons preset, and that they say it's use any icon with pure CSS for Uno CSS. So in this case, uh, there is this iconified JSON GitHub repository. Have you ever used that?
I have not. I've this when I was reading the docs earlier. That was the first time I'd noticed anything about icons in CSS. I mean, that makes, from a performance standpoint, I can see why that would work sort of like a base 64 encode of an image, where it's just, you're not downloading some big, huge thing or, fonts or images or something. It's just straight CSS that's right there. So it's going to be more performant.
Yeah, yeah, you kind of outlined it there. The Iconify set, there's an icon set, is like a master set of all these open source icon sets. So if you look at the collections, it has everything from material symbols, material design icons, Solar, Tabler, Bootstrap. It literally has like 100 different icon sets inside of it. And you don't have to install the whole thing. You can install like a subset of it. So they're all referenced with an @ sign. So you can install just MDI or just Solar if you want. So you install this as like an npm module into your app as a developer dependency. And then what you can do is you also install the preset icons preset inside UnoCSS. And what you can do is inside your classes, you put I dash and then the name of the icon set. So like if you're using VS Code, that's an icon set, VS Code dash icons, you put I dash VS Code dash icons. And then depending on the icon set, you put dash and then the name of the icon, which could be like circle or square, or maybe you have a pause button or a start button or something like that. And so that class gets interpreted and that div then becomes that class icon. And it's an SVG icon that's inside your app. So that's pretty neat. And there's a bunch of configuration too. You can make them inline block, or you can make them blocks, or you can vertically align them and things like that too. So it's just an easy way to add icons to your application. You can also add like your own custom icons too if you don't want to use Iconify.
Now, for a lot of these are just in black and white. So I'm assuming since they're CSS, you could also add color to them. Is that a safe assumption?
Yep. Yeah, you can take them and add fills to them, the CSS fill property, or just add a color class or color, yeah, color text color class, and you can change the colors of them too. Depends on the icon set on what they kind of give you and what they allow you to change the colors for. But yeah, I did when I was playing around with it, it's called Evil Icons, which I just thought was a cool name. And so I took the Evil Icon set and I took like a pause and I took like an arrow up and then I changed the color and everything seemed to work fine on it. It was pretty neat. Now you can use this as like a div tag and then add a class and then add in that utility class, the I dash and the name of the icon set and then the name of the icon. Or you can use this with the Tagify preset icon. So it's kind of hard to describe on a podcast here, but in that case, you can have your icon just be the tag name. So it would be I dash evil icons or EI dash up. And then that would be the icon name. And then it would just show up. So that was kind of neat combining those two presets together to do things. I'm not a big SVG icon guy, but this Iconify is the first time I've kind of been playing around with it. Usually in my other projects, my designer just gives me SVG icons or I extract them out of Figma or wherever else. But it was nice having like really nice icon set to play around with. Do you guys use icon sets at your job?
Yes, we use Fort Awesome.
Oh yeah,
So Font
that's
Awesome.
a great one too.
Yeah, so
Font Awesome.
we have our we pay for create our own custom set of icons and we just import them. And if we need to add one out of there, the nice thing is that you can say, okay, I only want these icons instead of the whole world, and then so you have your own custom icon set. If we need to add one, then we add one and do it that way. So yeah, that works pretty well.
The last one I just want to mention is the web fonts preset, and that one allows you to add any of the Google web fonts just really quickly to your app. The way it works is you inside your configuration in your Vite config file, you would put a preset web fonts, and then you can put the provider and the type of fonts that you want without having to install them all. And then it'll automatically generate the CSS. So like, for example, in their docs, they have, you wanted to add in like Fire Code or Roboto, and it's the provider is Google. And then it'll automatically do the import of the URL for you and grab all the fonts for you. So that's pretty handy too.
Yeah, it looks like it also supports Bunny. I have never heard of Bunny before now, and Font Share. So
Yeah, I've always used Google Fonts, or I've downloaded the font directly into my app. I don't know what are you a font guy? I don't know.
browser fonts is about the extent of my knowledge. So no, I haven't really played with fonts too much. But yeah, that's cool. I like this that you can just sort of pick and choose from different sets. That's
Oh,
cool.
Bunny is it says it's a privacy-friendly Google font. So if you're like a
Yeah.
Google font person, but you want like privacy-enabled Google fonts, then I guess you use Bunny.
Wonder what that means, privacy-enabled fonts.
I don't know.
Does that
I
mean
guess
people
why
can't
not
steal
just
them
like
from your
download
website?
why not just like download the font and then do it that way? We had a discussion a few years ago at an old startup I was in. Like, should we use Google Fonts, or is that going to cause like slowdowns or issues later on, or should we always use our own fonts that we downloaded? I don't know if I think we ended up just downloading all our fonts and importing them that way.
Yeah, the Bunny fonts just says they have a zero tracking and no logging policy. It helps you stay fully GDPR compliant. Put your users' personal data into their own hands. Not sure how that works, but anyway.
Google Fonts work great for most people.
Yeah, I'll have to maybe play with fonts at some point. I struggle just to get a decent dashboard to look good, just because I have no design chops. Somebody give me a design and I'll implement it, but that's about it. So one of those things I should probably learn if I want to do front end, huh? So what about the documentation? I know when I'm working with Tailwind, I live quite a bit in their docs. Is it pretty good? It looks like it's sort of a search and find type of thing instead of putting it all out there for you.
I think their docs are excellent. A little tidbit: when I was learning this, I didn't have access, or I think they changed their website when I was looking at it. But the long story short, the website is great. It has lots of good information, and it's fine to go through, and they did a great job of finding information on it. I think, as always, when you probably get into the sticky wicket of configuration, I like the happy path is great for UnoCSS. I'm certain when we get into a little bit more difficult issue, when you get into like off the happy path and you're doing a bunch of overrides, configurations, then I would say where the documentation probably isn't as robust. But for the most part, it's been great. I haven't had any real issues. It looks like, I want to say this is a website that's created with, I wonder if this is created with another Vue product. What is this created with? It looks like it's dog fooding UnoCSS for sure, at least.
I would assume so.
I think
It
it's
looks
using
like it's
VitePress.
Nuxt. Looks like it's Nuxt.
Oh, maybe it is not. It was thinking of either VitePress or Nuxt. I'm not sure.
Yeah, because my dev tools said Nuxt and Vue are detected on this page. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the documents are interesting because they're, if you're familiar with the Tailwind docs, everything's in the middle and you've got your nav bar on the left side and you can click and go right there. Whereas the UnoCSS docs are interactive, so there's a big search bar up at the top, and then it has a type ahead type feature. So if you type the typing margin, then you'll get a whole list of different margin left, margin top, margin bottom, and then on the right it gives you some documentation. So
I will say there's two different ways to your point that you can. There's the UnoCSS.dev, which is like the guide, how to get started, configurations, integrations, things like that. Then there's the interactive docs, which is more of a type in what
It's
you're
a
looking for,
reference. It's a
like more of
reference.
a, exactly, more like a reference where you can just type in margin. And then there's the playground, which
Mm-hmm.
is really slick, where you can type in classes and see on the left-hand side, like in an interactive playground, and it updating in real time. So I can type in like text to Excel, and it'll automatically change it. And even has what's really cool. I don't know. I wonder what library they use. As I am typing into the playground, the UnoCSS Plus playground, this looks like an HTML file with all the tags on there.
Mm-hmm.
It's giving me like a type ahead autocomplete in the browser, which is really cool. So I can do it in. And their type, by the way, they also have inside their playground, they're using Attributify. So instead of putting classes everywhere, you just type in the attribute right on like the div tag for text to Excel, and it just does everything for you,
Mm-hmm.
which is really nice. So it's pretty slick. I mean, definitely, I like it. Like it like that.
Cool. Yeah, maybe we'll have to get Anthony Antfu on here sometime. Maybe give us a little more detail. Behind the scenes goodies. That's always fun to get.
Yeah, has he been on here?
No, I've never had Anthony on before. Know the
I don't
name,
think.
like most everybody else.
Yeah, I don't think he does too many podcasts. But it'd be great if he does.
Yeah, I'll definitely reach out to him for sure.
Mhm.
For sure. I know he was, we were talking earlier, he was sequestered in a hotel in China for a while last year. So, as I understand, he's not sure where he's at, where he's based, but yeah, I'll
I'm
have to
guessing that
talk to him.
guy's just really busy, just with all the great things he's doing for the VUE community
Oh, yeah, he's in a lot of
and
stuff for sure.
the web development community in general.
Cool. All right. With that, we'll wrap up our talk about UnoCSS. Yet another tool in the burgeoning web development world of ways to make your content look good,
Hmm.
for sure. So with that, we'll move to picks. Picks are the part of the show where we get to talk about things that we like to talk about that may have something to do with tech and web development, or maybe not. Just depends on, I guess, what your thing is for the day. One of the things I'll bring up is an interesting article about Chat GPT. And if you've listened to, read anything on Hacker News, I swear half the articles are about Chat GPT anymore and all the different tools that people have been creating in that ecosystem. Um, and I think as of right now, Chat GPT 4 is the most recent version. It's been interesting to see some of the stories about it. It's like anything else. Everybody's on the bleeding edge. Oh, this is great. It was awesome. And then you start to slow down and say, well, maybe there's some issues that we need to talk about. I remember when it first came out and how Google flopped miserably trying to get it out the door without making sure it was working correctly. And some of the issues with the Bing bot. There's AI is going to be like any other tool, modeling, whatever, over it's garbage in, garbage out. So it's only as good as the programmers, behind it. But here's an interesting story. I came upon an interesting story about the impact that can have on an individual. Jonathan Turley is a law professor at George Washington University, and he's a pretty big commentator on legal issues. You'll see him in different publications. And there's an interesting article in the Washington Post recently that referred to a post that he has on his own site, jonathanturley.org, about how he was contacted by a reporter, I believe it was, about a claim of sexual harassment that was never made against him on a trip that never occurred while he was on a faculty where he never taught.
Wow.
That's a quote from the first paragraph of his blog post. And it says, ChatGPT relied on a cited Washington Post article that was never written and quotes a statement that was never made by the newspaper. When the Post investigated, it learned that another AI program, Microsoft's Bing, which is powered by GPT-4, repeated the false claim about him. So in other words, something that never happened was made to appear as if it did happen. So to me, that's sort of scary. I'm probably one of the few people that hasn't jumped in and played with this stuff for the Chat GTP and the language models and so on. Probably because I tend to like to sort of sit back and see how things shake out before I really dive in. So I'm reserving judgment at this point. You'll hear a lot of people talking about stuff like this in terms of writing code. in terms of helping people write code. You know, you already had something sort of like, you know, GitHub Copilot, right? Um, and other tools like that. And you hear various opinions. Yes, this is going to replace all programmers. And no, it's not. It's just going to help you do things better and faster because this will do some of the lower level stuff for you. There's good and bad to it. And I can certainly see its benefits, provided they're used properly. You know, not used as a cure-all. Oh, this is going to replace Google is one of the great ones I've heard. I'm like, really? Okay. I don't know about that. But anyway, so the title of this blog post by Jonathan Turley is Defamed by ChatGPT, My Own Bizarre Experience with Artificiality of Quote-Unquote Artificial Intelligence. So I'll drop that link to that in the show notes for sure. But then with that, we get to what I like to refer to as the high point of every podcast, although I'm sure some people would contest that assertion, which are the dad jokes of the week. So not too long ago, a cannibal crashed my dinner party and rudely demanded that I feed him. I gave him a piece of my mind. So, you know, being an older person, I guess I can say back in the day, my day, excessive use of commas was considered a very serious crime. It usually resulted in a long sentence. Right?
That's a good one.
We'll say that. And then, you know, people say, from a health standpoint, people say that circumcision is not painful, you know, because the baby's, you know, so young. But personally, I couldn't walk for a year after I got mine. But right? So imagine the drum jokes. Anyway, those are my picks. You got any for us, Eric?
I feel like I should talk about Bard because I was trying, that's Google's version of ChatGPT 4, has different language models, completely different that way, but it's a similar interface where you can ask it prompts and it gives you answers. And so far, I've felt it's a little underwhelming compared to ChatGPT. I've tried some prompts in the past, like create a Vue 3 app that does this, and then it'll be like, sorry, can't do that, or it'll tell me I'm a text-based AI and that is outside of my capabilities. So it feels like the prompts aren't quite as good as ChatGPT. It feels like I barely, like most of the time, ChatGPT would try to do something, at least regarding code. Or maybe I just am not a good enough prompter. That's funny, that story that you just mentioned. I guess they call it hallucination, like your AI hallucinates, makes up facts and stories. I wonder if that'll be an issue as things go on. It's funny, this whole tech cycle of AI and ChatGPT. Like I fully admit, last year and the year before, I jumped into Web3 feet first, got really into it. I've been into
blockchain.
I did crypto. I've owned crypto for a while, but when crypto started going crazy, everybody was doing blockchain development. I started learning it and I jumped in, and it's so funny like how everybody quickly turned on crypto and blockchain in general. Not everyone. There's still some amazing products, amazing people working in that space that I highly respect. But it feels like in general, like it's definitely cooled down a lot. And now everybody's jumping on the AI bandwagon. I just saw a good friend of mine just tweet like, "Hey, I'm dropping everything for AI. I'm all in." And then even I saw some tweets from other people saying like, if I was beginning my career, I would just go all in AI right now. And I wonder if there's any parallels of the Web3 mania that was happening a year or two ago and what's happening now. I guess in some respects, a lot of people are saying Web3 didn't have very good use cases. Like there was nothing ever someone was like, wow, I really need to do this because Web3 really solves this thing. Like blockchain is interesting and decentralization is interesting, but there wasn't a killer use case. And now people are all finding like, well, at least I can use ChatGPT to give me 10 titles for a blog article I'm writing, or I can use ChatGPT to answer some questions that will much harder I could answer. So it feels like there's more use cases, but I don't really find like there's a killer use case for it. But man, the hype is just insane right now.
Well, I know in the educational world, some of the things I've been reading about is how, which to me is rather unfortunate, is how kids will use it to write papers. generate papers or do homework assignments or find stuff like that, which is aren't you supposed to be learning stuff by doing it on your own? Not sort of defeat the purpose, but I don't know. And issues with professors trying to determine the difference between an actually written paper versus one written by AI. So there's some tools that way for sure. It's interesting that people say it's almost like a sentient being. And well, no, it's really not. I mean, it's like I said, garbage in, garbage out. It's only going to do. It's not going to be able to think actually and come up with stuff on its own. It's basing off what it's been trained to do. So
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Like I'm seeing like a bunch of different use cases. Some bad, like you're talking about, like kids plagiarizing or cheating using ChatGPT to write their papers, and then I am seeing like some use cases coming out, which is way more than I saw in the Web3 world, where everybody was still like, well, we can create NFTs and pay for JPEGs, and wasn't quite where it is now. So I'm excited though. It's really neat. So I guess Bard would be my pick, and also I'll just throw out a quick plug at Amplify. As a developer advocate, we've been releasing a lot of cool connected components that work with our AWS Amplify system. So we recently created a storage manager, which is, I think the last time on, I may have talked about a file uploader. This is kind of like the second revision of a file uploader, but it has a lot more features. It allows you to upload files. It's like a React component. Not really useful for Vue developers who are listening right now, but I'm sure if you have a React project and you need to connect to some AWS services, check that out.
Yeah, we did a podcast. It's been a year. I'm not sure how long ago it's been where we had you on to talk about Vue at
Yeah.
AWS.
Yeah, and we still do tons of Vue. There's still great support for Vue for AWS Amplify, and then we have some features that are React only, and some are Vue only.
Right, right. And we'll drop he mentioned a video that he was doing yesterday. It was sort of was it a AMA type thing, or just you're demonstrating how to use Tailwind or Uno with Amplify?
Yeah. I did. I'm doing more live streaming for fun, just part of my developer advocate work, and just it's kind of fun talking to people. So I've been doing more of those often. So I'm trying to do one a week, just like an hour, just do Q&A. I'm also just building apps live on my YouTube channel. I'm gonna set up Twitch soon. I just haven't done it yet, but I'll probably like simulcast on Twitch and YouTube live stream probably an hour a week and just build fun apps and try to educate people on Amplify, and not even just Amplify, just like web development best practices in general. So I've it's definitely challenging a little bit to do live streaming, but I'm getting used to it. It's fun.
That's being risky.
Yeah.
You get stuck in something. Sorry, I'm going to pause for a minute while I figure what the heck is going on here, right?
Exactly. I do I have been leaving the live streams up after the fact though, so if you want to watch it on demand, you can. But I'd also just recommend the YouTube channel Erik.video, where I have more specialized videos on different topics, like UnoCSS. I did about a 20-minute video on that, and that's where I got a lot of feedback.
Yeah, if you watch the video, you can see where I sort of bombed Erik.
Yeah.
I jumped in the middle of this video. I was like, oh, I forgot about this. So I turned it on, and he's creating a new app, and I'm watching the chat, and he's like, well, for this particular case, we're going to use React. And, for whatever the reason was, I don't remember. And somebody's in there, why aren't you using Vue? And I got in there and said, what? Vue? You're a heretic. And he finally got down to my thing and started laughing. I was like, oh, good. I was hoping he'd recognize me, not that it's a nut job. Well, maybe it is the same thing. But cool. All right. Well, thanks for coming on, man. Again, man, it's good to have you, as always. And I'm trying to think what else I was going to say. That's it. So if you have any suggestions for topics or anything you want to talk about, you can always ping me on Twitter at Wonder95, or we are also at Views on Vue. And Erik is what? Erik CH, is that right?
Yep. Erik CH, ERIKCH on Twitter, and DMs are open.
All righty. With that, we'll wrap it up. Thanks to everybody for listening, and we'll talk at you next time on Views on Vue.